Now, as far as Bleach fans go, I'm an unapologetic, massive fan of the 1000 Year Blood War arc. I think you'll probably know that if you've been following my channel now for the last 6 months or so. The amount of content I produce about the final arc, I love it a lot. I think it's really, really great. I think it's Bleach at its craziest, its most unpredictable, but in many ways it's most ambitious and it's most fun. It's very cliche, it's full of Bleach tropes, but if you love that sort of thing, you'll love the 1000 Year Blood War arc despite its warts. And I'm not saying the arc is flawless, it obviously isn't. It has major glaring issues. But for the most part, I enjoyed my read week to week when I was reviewing the final arc. I thought it was really great. I liked many of the new characters introduced, as underdeveloped as they may have been. And I think Kubo did a pretty good job on the whole of introducing a scary new enemy to really put the Soul Society on its toes and really push the stakes further than they had ever been. As far as I'm concerned, from the start of the arc up until the start of the second invasion, Kubo was firing on all cylinders with this story, and I don't feel he really made a single misstep. In many ways, the start of the 1000 Year Blood War arc was responsible for a resurgence in Bleach's popularity, and it's pretty easy to see why. The arc was absolutely insane to read on a weekly basis. It was so exciting every single week. However, there did come a turning point, and for me, I know exactly what that scene is, and I want to talk about that in detail with you guys today. One egregious scene where I actually read the chapter and kind of couldn't believe that Kubo had done what he did. I remember reading it and thinking, this feels like a huge mistake, Kubo. You've disrespected and thrown away two characters with immense potential. And you know, these villains, they were kind of, at this point, they still had a lot of their hype surrounding them. We were only a few villains deep as far as dead characters go, and it felt like many of these Quincies had a lot to give. And as far as I'm concerned, this scene not only signalled the moment when the 1000 Year Blood War arc made its first slip up, it was also the first moment the Sternritters were really disappointing as characters, and that scene is the execution of Cang Du and BG9. As far as I'm concerned, it's an egregious scene that has no real reason to exist other than to waste two of the coolest characters Kubo introduced in this final arc. And I want to look at this scene in particular and the context surrounding it and do a bit of a deep dive analysis and kind of figure out why Kubo did what he did, the mistakes that were made, and maybe how we could have written it slightly differently. If you're new here, guys, you're in the perfect place for Bleach content just like this. Videos come out every single week, so hit the subscribe button now. Push me towards 30,000 subs, which is a number I can't even fathom, to be honest. I don't know how the channel's got to this point. But I really appreciate the support all the same. You guys have been absolutely amazing. Don't forget to give the video a like as well if you enjoyed it. It does really help with the exposure on YouTube. And hit the notification bell as well so that you get all of my videos in your sub box every single week. If you want to be a part of the wider community, my name on Twitter is appearing below. You can follow me over there. It's a bit easier for me to talk to people on there, get kind of less messages coming through. And also I have a Discord as well, so make sure to join that with the link that is in the description below. So for a little bit of context then, Kubo structures the 1000 Year Blood War arc very differently to previous major story arcs in Bleach. There's no real damsel in distress in this arc. For the most part, the whole arc is a war set against the Soul Society, and it's structured in the way of two major invasions, and then the last invasion, the second invasion, is kind of split in half essentially to make three major story moments. Now, the first invasion is widely considered by fans to be one of the best moments in Bleach, period. It's an incredible rush of despair, of panic, of anguish. Kubo said in an interview before the 1000 Year Blood War arc that the Royal Guard would appear in this story, but they would only appear if an event happened in the Soul Society that made everyone scream out in anguish, and I think it's safe to say that does happen. The first invasion is relentless. In the first invasion, we're only introduced to a few members of the Sternritter, the enemy army that is attacking the Soul Society with power enough to combat the captains and maybe even surpass them. Now, I mentioned in a video I made a couple of months ago called Kubo's Biggest Mistake with the Sternritters that I felt the biggest failing of these guys was a lack of any kind of definition in their power hierarchy. I think it created unfair expectations for every single one of these characters, and only some characters were able to meet those expectations. The Schutzstaffel are introduced much, much later on in the story, too late in my opinion, as more powerful Sternritters, but apart from that, there's no distinction between the Sternritters of the lower ranks. So you can go into the story expecting characters like Robert Akutrone to do really impressive things and to have a big fight like, say, Kurge Opie had at the start of the story, but it's not necessarily going to happen because they're not all as powerful as each other. Now let's look at some of the Sternritters we were introduced to in the first invasion. There were 4 Sternritters in particular, 2 of whom were named, who stole Captain's Bankais and made a bit of an impression. As Not, of course, is probably the most famous of all of these characters from the first invasion, but also Bambietta Bastabine is a fan favourite as well, both of them being 2 of probably the most popular Sternritters around, with some decent screen time afforded to both. In many ways, the other 2 characters who stole Bankai, while given a similar level of prominence, they feel like they're forgotten about. And those characters are Sternritter I, Cang Du, and Sternritter K, BG9, who steal Toshiro and Soifon's Bankais respectively. They still manage to take a Captain's Bankai, but Kubo spends considerably less time on these characters, but regardless, people were excited to see them do something in the future. It seemed a pretty obvious setup to most that they would eventually fight the captains again who they stole the Bankai from, and probably somehow lose it, but we didn't know how, we didn't know where, and we didn't know why. It's only at the start of the second invasion do we finally kind of see this play out, and it leads to the egregious scene in question. BG9 starts by fighting Soifon first, and you know what, it's actually a decent battle, albeit very, very short, but the choreography on show is really nice. What's annoying, however, about BG9 and Cang Du to some degree is that there is a real level of mystique here about these characters that Kubo just seems completely reticent to address. BG9 is a robot in a Quincy army, and basically nobody brings it up. Soifon mentions it once, when she's surprised that BG9 is able to still breathe after her attack. BG9 coldly replies that he never had any breath to begin with, at which point Soifon says you must be a wind-up doll, and it's just left after that. It's never mentioned again. Cang Du himself is also a pretty awesome character with a really striking design. I think personally he looks like one of the coolest Sternritters out of them all. Among an army where a lot of these characters are pretty goofy looking, Cang Du manages to toe the line between being incredibly serious but not too serious, and actually managing to look really awesome at the same time, complete with his whole martial arts getup and his Wolverine claw weapons. But don't expect to learn a thing about this guy, because he's dispatched almost as quickly as he arrives. Unfortunately, for some reason, Kubo decided to let Bazby fight Hitsugaya first at the start of this invasion, and then Cang Du arrives just as Hitsugaya is on death's door. Like I said, I was very happy with the arc up until this point, but I could sense something was off with this scene. It seemed far, far too convenient that Cang Du would arrive on the battlefield the moment Keisuke Urahara has discovered a way for the captains to get their Bankais back. It was a very contrived setup. And of course it plays out exactly how you would assume it does. For some reason Cang Du feels the need to take the kill from Bazby. Apparently Yuha Bark has issued an order where the Sternritters who stole the Bankai must kill the captains who they stole them from. I don't really know why, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense from someone who's as ruthlessly efficient as Yuha Bark, but I assume it's supposed to be one final insult to these Shinigami, so I can let that go, it makes enough sense. But Hitsugaya gets his Bankai back and proceeds to just destroy Cang Du in a matter of panels. The fight they have is a single chapter long. It's incredibly disappointing because Cang Du is a really cool looking Sternritter with a lot of intrigue about him. There's a weird juxtaposition in the way his character is handled as well. He says absolutely nothing for his first few major appearances, and Kubo seems to make a point of that as well, giving Cang Du nothing but a speech bubble with ... in it every time you see him. But then for some reason, the moment he arrives on the battlefield, he gets serious diarrhea of the mouth and just talks and talks and talks about almost nonsense. Admittedly, some of his lines are pretty cool, but they're only surface level cool because he doesn't ever achieve anything. He says things like, it really breaks my heart to know that the Bankai I've taken from you will live long after your death, because I believe that those who live together should die together. That's my way of doing things. That's cool, but don't ever expect to find out anything more about the way this guy thinks. In fact, Hitsugaya overpowers him so quickly that I don't really even understand what goes on in this scene. I don't know if we're supposed to believe that Hitsugaya's newly hollowified Bankai is what's given him such an increase in power against Kang, but it just doesn't really make any sense. Hitsugaya seems to just do this with his sword, and Kang is instantly frozen. BG9 suffers a similar fate, if slightly more understandable. Kubo plays up the whole robot aspect by saying that the hollowified Bankai has interfered with his sensors and he's now unable to move, allowing Soifon a direct hit with her Bankai, which to me does make a little more sense. These characters are not done, however, and Kubo makes a point of showing that they activate their holy forms and both of them survive. And I was expecting, and I think most people were expecting, the way this was framed to indicate a second round. You know, like, what's going to happen next? Hitsugaya has defeated Kang, but he's exhausted. He's collapsed on the floor, and Kang has just broken free of the ice thanks to his Volstendick. And BG9 has used it as well and clearly escaped death. But you don't see them fight ever again. It's completely weird, and the whole setup smacks of Kubo changing his mind at the last minute of how to deal with these characters. And I think this speaks volumes to the issues people had with the Sternritters. Kubo's changing priorities in how he wants to handle these characters. I don't think it's unfair to have assumed in the first invasion that the 4 major Sternritters who stole Captain's Bankais would have been treated with some level of importance. And while Az and Bambietta kind of are, Cang Du and BG9 are quite literally thrown aside. The worst part is the setup feels like they were setting up for a proper fight. They activate their Volstendick and you don't even get to see it. You don't even get to see it. The next time we see these two characters, they are kneeling on the floor for some reason in front of Yhwach, and we come to the scene in question, their execution. Now this is just so incredibly random and it just comes out of nowhere. Apparently Yhwach wants to execute these two guys for quote-unquote failing. Now, this is nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Not only is Cang Du completely unharmed, but the captain he was facing is down. Why doesn't he just kill him? You know, how have they failed if the fight is not over? You know, going by that logic, after Lil Barrow gets his head cut off by Shin Sui, the next time we see him he should be kneeling on the ground in front of Yhwach because he's failed, even though he's still got fight left in him. It doesn't make any sense, and it smacks of Kubo being like, I need to get rid of these two characters quickly because I've got way too many characters to deal with. And it's such a huge shame that awesome-looking characters like Cang Du and BG9 are just thrown aside. They're thrown into the rubbish. And characters like Pepe are given 3 to 4 chapters of fighting. It's not good, and I remember reading it and just thinking, this is weird. I remember thinking there's no way Kubo's actually going to kill Kang and BG9, because we don't know anything about these guys, and they seem really awesome, and they just activated their holy forms. What's worse is that Kubo acknowledges this in this scene. BG9 even says to Yhwach, we can still fight for you. We were able to escape death by using the holy form. And Yhwach just doesn't seem to care. He's like, oh, it's whatever. I'm just going to kill you anyway. Yhwach says, well, that's some good fortune you've had there. But then Hashwalth walks into the scene and says, good fortune must be balanced out by ill fortune, and tries to kill them. It's a nonsensical move that makes zero sense from a military standpoint, from a strategy standpoint, and from a story standpoint. You've got these two really cool characters that people are desperate to see more of, that people want answers about. We have no idea why BG9 is a robot. Why is he in the Quincy army? But it doesn't matter, because Kubo's set on killing them here and now for no reason whatsoever. Cang Du is completely unharmed. I cannot stress that enough. He is unharmed. Hitsugaya simply froze him, but he broke free. And yet he just leaves Hitsugaya's unconscious body because he was forced to go back to Silburn to await his execution. It's nonsense. And so many of the Sternritters fail in battle, and yet apparently they don't have to be summoned back. The majority of the Bambis fail at some point in the war, but they don't have to come back. Nobody else ever comes back. This fight, this execution thing is never seen again. Now, a part of me wonders if maybe this was simply done so that Yhwach can take their souls back and bolster his own power, but it feels unnecessary. We didn't even know that was a thing at the time. I don't know, maybe if this was just simply designed to give us a hint at Hashwolf's true power, because he tries to kill Cang Du, and in what is admittedly a badass moment, Cang just blocks his sword as Hashwolf tries to cut his head off, and we get to see Cang Du's Shrift, the iron, in action. And he does say something really cool here. He says, you know what my power is. It's not hard for me to stop your blade. Nobody is going to kill me apart from His Majesty. And even in his final moments, even in this ridiculous scenario, Cang is still showing insane loyalty to Yhwach. But then Hashwolf activates the balance and just cuts him in half. And you have to assume that Hashwolf just butchers him and then butchers BG9. And it's like, why? Why? It's so annoying. It annoys me to this day. I can't read that scene without just thinking about the potential that was just thrown away for no reason. No reason at all. Kubo seemed to be setting up a round 2 for these guys, and then clearly decided at the 11th hour he wasn't interested in going that route at all, and just got rid of these characters. And as such, Cang and BG9 end up looking really stupid because they get executed for apparently no reason. And it has bugged me ever since. I do think it's the most egregious treatment of any Sternritters in the series, pretty much, because I think Cang and BG9 had so much to offer, and they were set up on a pedestal of roughly the same importance as Az and Bambietta, and they feel completely forgotten about in kind of comparison. They do nothing. They do nothing. Cang especially is just a huge disappointment. But that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Sorry if it feels like a bit of a downer, but I've been really wanting to talk about the scene where they get executed a lot, because it was one where I was dumbfounded when I read it in the manga. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is ridiculous. No way is Cang dead. Surely he's going to come back. Surely BG9's going to come back. I also don't like BG9's characterization in this scene. He goes from being a cold, calculating, ruthless robot to apparently begging for his life. Like, he's afraid of dying, apparently. He's afraid of pain, but he's a robot. Never explained. Don't expect to see it again. But that's it for this video, guys. I do hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with my analysis on the Cang Du and BG9 execution scene. Did you like it? Do you think it made any sense? Why Hashwolf felt the need to balance his own team, despite the fact they should be doing everything they need to do to win? I don't understand that. Killing off 2 of your most powerful warriors, despite one of them being unharmed, seems very dumb from a strategy standpoint, but that's just me, guys. Let me know in the comments below if you thought this was a smart decision, if you enjoyed this scene. What did you think of Cang and BG9? Do you think they had more to show? Let me know, guys, but until next time, I shall catch you later, and I'll see you then. See ya.